Chapter 6 The Regeneration of Humanity. Monastic life. Zen monastic life is very well organized. The tradition is the same today as it was in the 8th century when Master Pujang set down the monastic code that carried his name. The monastery where he lived was on the Thai Tong mountain at Hangzhou in the province of Kianghi. The name of the mountain was later changed to Pujang. Pujang's rules are a synthesis of the spirit of the early Buddhist and Mahayana disciplines. The monastic tradition of the Zen school began to be distinct and independent of monastic tradition of the Vinaya school at that time. Each monastery is placed under the direction of a superior, Vinju, or Vinyamvien. The monk who has the role of administrative director is called Dishi, and he is responsible for monastery as if it were a community or an organization. The monk Tivian has charge of the garden and ground, the Tuko that of the kitchen, the Titang that of the library, and Titian and the Hungyang of the sanctuary. The Thich looks after the visitor, monks, and lay people. The Vina is in charge of the recitation meeting and the ceremonies, and the Tichung is charged with problems concerning relation between members of the community. There are some jobs that are done by everyone in turn. The monks who are responsible for them during the day are called the Thich Nhat. The young and the novice Shramanera fill the role of Thiya attendants in order to help the high monk in their daily existence and to learn from them the way to conduct themselves in monastic life. Twice a month, all the monks meet in the Buddha hall for the Buddha ceremony, a review of the observance of the Bhikshu rules, of which there are 250, and of the 58 Bodhisattva rules. Novices don't participate in the recitation of these rules. They have their own novitiate rules, of which there are 10, and their manual of conduct to recite together in another room in the monastery. The 6 principles of living in harmony, known as the 6 concords, are also recited. 1. To live together in the same conditions. 2. To observe the same rules. 3. To speak carefully to avoid dispute. 4. To share one's goods. 5. To share different points of view. 6. To create harmony of opinion in order to maintain the Chodavira of the community. The monks get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to the sound of the Baojun bell. They have 15 minutes to wash, dress, and make their beds. Then they gather in the meditation hall and practice sitting meditation. A monk stands by the Baojun bell and chant the meditation chant, accompanied by the sound of this bell. It is a prelude chant. The 5th division of the night has already begun, and the door to reality is open. I wish the whole world were on the path of wisdom, that each person penetrate deeply the teaching of the 3 vehicles and realize the harmony of the two truths, and that the sun of great realization rise and dispel all clouds of darkness. The great bell is sounded regularly and slowly during the meditation period, 13. After 13, everyone assembles in Buddha Hall for sutta recitation. Breakfast is normally a bowl of rice, sometimes mixed with bean. It is done with pickled vegetables and soy sauce. Silence is maintained during eating. When the meal is finished, the Payana Paramita Hiraya Sutta is cited. After breakfast, each monk goes about his tasks. The housework is done, the sanctuary floor is washed, some monks work in the garden or in the field, carry water, or look for firewood. At 11:30 a.m., there is a short rest. Lunch is at midday and is the principal meal. When the Baojun bell is invited to sound, each monk washes and dresses in the outang, then goes to the procession in the dining hall and sits upright on his seat in front of his bowl. The meal proceeds according to ceremony. Body and mind are fixed on the content of the meal. In the afternoon from 2:30 until 5:30, there is another work period. The evening meal, if there is one, consists of rice soup and the leftovers from lunch. A period of sutta recitation begins at 7 in the evening. After 8 comes a time for study and practice sitting meditation. Bedtime follows the end of the last meditation period. Anyone who wishes may continue to meditate late into the night. The retreat. Each year, from the 15th of the 4th lunar month to the 15th of the 7th month, the Ketha season is organized. During this period, one doesn't leave the monastery and intensively practice Dhartin. Monks who live alone in distant pagoda return to their monasteries in order to participate in Ketha season. There is a period of concentrated study and practice. Sometimes Gedom seasons, which also last 3 months, are organized in the winter. These allow whoever couldn't leave his pagoda or community during the summer Ketha to participate in Ketdom. Outside the collective meditation hall, which can sometimes hold up to 700 monks, there also exists little Zen hut for one person called That or Kok. In Vietnam, especially in the southern part, many of these little Zen huts are found. The climate is warm in the southern region, and it is ample protection to construct small huts with bamboo and coconut palm leaves in a simple way. A Zen practitioner can remain in his kok 3 years or 1 year or 3 months according to his liking. A novice is appointed to assist him during this period. The period during which a Zen monk intends to be alone in his kok, Nhập Thất, is truly a period of absolute retreat. The monk doesn't leave his vicinity of the kok. The novice who attend him maintain connection between the monastery and the kok. He gets water, rice, vegetables, fruit, etc. The monk in retreat may do his own cooking. In his kok, there is only a bed. We also serve as a meditation seat, a table, a lamp, a towel, a toothbrush, and some suttas. The monk, during this solo retreat, rarely speaks or doesn't speak at all. His assistant must be very attentive. He must know what his master needs and make his life as comfortable as possible. While assisting a master in retreat, a novice can learn many things in silence. For the most part, the Thich Tong and Nhất period are devoted to the practice of thirteen. The practitioner sits on his cushion in the lotus posture, the right foot placed on the left thick and the left foot placed on the right thick. He holds his head up and his spine straight, keeps his eyes down, and places the left hand on the right hand. The lotus posture is a very stable and energizing position. If beginners feel some pain in this position, they can begin by practicing a half lotus position, which is the right leg placed on the left thick or vice versa. After several hours stationary in the lotus posture, the practitioner may get up and walk in Kinhan, a very slow walk in the meditation hall or around the clock. If the 13 is practiced collectively, the time of Kinhan will be fixed in advance. One walk in file very slowly, silently, with eyes lowered, several times around the meditation hall in a clockwise direction. Mindfulness is maintained while walking, taking one step with the left foot while breathing in and one step with the right foot while breathing out. Alternating 13 and Kinhan ensure that the blood circulation is maintained and ease the pain in the legs. But mindfulness is not only practiced during 13 and Kinhan. It is necessary to learn to maintain in mindfulness even while working in a garden, sweeping the courtyard, washing clothes, or washing the dishes. Many Zen masters have come to enlightenment during their daily work. It is essential that the Zen practitioner be able to live mindfully in each moment of the day. There is no enlightenment outside of daily life. The encounter. From time to time, interviews are organized during which the disciple finds himself face to face with his teacher. He tells his teacher about his experiences, his difficulties, and his doubts. He may also present his view of Zen in order to get instructions. These meetings are called Tamvan, Japanese Sanzen, or Zen encounters. Questions and answers may sometimes be expressed very energetically. The disciple then has the opportunity to present himself and his individual case. Encounters of this sort, as well as impromptu encounters between the master and the group of monks in a corridor or in a garden, are called tiutham, or small encounters. The encounters that take place at fixed time, in which the whole assembly participate, are called daytime or great encounters. The exchanges of questions and answers during this great encounter may have the experience of formidable confrontations. A monk presents himself to the master before the entire assembly and exposes himself to a severe test. The master uses questions, sometimes even yells or physical blows, in order to put the disciple to the test. Everyone attends as a witness to the sense, in a state of tension that arouses great mindfulness in them. Monks who voluntarily offer themselves to the test are described as entering into combat, sudden. Senior monks sometimes leave the monastery in order to live in a private hut, to become master in a new monastery, or to go to a pilgrimage. What has been described here has been very general. Of course, it's the same practice for nuns. Plum Village, where I now live and practice in France, is a community of both monks and nuns living in separate hamlets. The role of the laity. Zen, however, doesn't belong to monk only. Everyone can study and practice it. Many laymen have been recognized as illustrious Zen masters. The laity are related to the monastery by the material support they provide, as it sometimes happens that the labor of the monk isn't sufficient to ensure the upkeep of the monastery. The laity are also related to the monasteries by their participation in the construction of temples and sanctuaries, and by their cultural activities, for example, the printing and publishing of sutras and scriptural works by monks. A good number of monasteries each month organize Bát Quan Trai Giới for laymen who wish to live for 24 hours or 48 hours in a monastery exactly like monks. Places are reserved for them for this period of Bát Quan Trai Giới, during which they practice Zen under the direction of monks. It is through the close interaction of the laity and the monks that the essence of Zen penetrates social life. Zen influences poetry, painting, architecture, and music. The traditional flower arrangement, tea ceremony, calligraphy, Chinese ink painting, and watercolor have their source in the spiritual reality of Zen. Zen isn't only reflected in the technique of art, but also by the essence of the art. The technique reflects the self-mastery of the artist, while the content reflects the spiritual understanding of the artist. The art are the connecting link between the spiritual world of Zen and the everyday world of society. Zen and the world of today. Our picture of an enlightened person is of someone very free who possesses spiritual strength and isn't pushed around by the current of society. The practitioner, once enlightened, sees herself in her true nature, knows herself, and possesses a clear view of reality, the reality of her being and of the social situation. This vision is the most precious fruit Zen can offer. The enlightened person's way of being is the most fundamental and beneficent contribution to society and all life that she can make. Zen is a living tradition that produces stable, healthy, and balanced people. The art and thought that have their source in the enlightenment of Zen also possesses vitality and clear-sighted serenity. Contemporary man is dragged along in a producing and consuming treadmill to the point where he began to become a part of the machine and loses mastery of himself. Daily life dissipates our spirit, eats up our time, and thus doesn't leave the opportunity to become aware of ourselves or return to our deeper self. Accustomed as we are to being constantly occupied, if this occupation should be taken from us, we find ourselves empty and abundant. Still, we refuse to confront ourselves and instead of go off in search of friends to mix in with the crowd, to listen to the radio or to the television to get rid of this impression of emptiness. Present-day life, agitated to the extreme, make us so easily irritated. Emotions overwhelm us many times a day. In fact, they dominate and process us. If we are no longer ourselves, how can we say it is we who live and decide our life? Life today is organized according to reason. We participate in life with only part of our being, our intellect, our manoviyana. The other half, deeper and more important, is the store consciousness, the foundation of the root of our being. This part cannot be analyzed by reason or even by the manoviyana itself. Man today loves reason. He trusts his rationality so much that he is uprooted from his true being. From this comes the feeling of alienation, from which he suffers, and through this, little by little, his humanity becomes more and more mechanical. The revolt of the 1960s and the 1970s was the manifestation of our desire to recapture our human spirit. If we are unable to create a new path by which to discover our true nature, the human race may be condemned to disappear. Never in history have we had to face such potentially calamitous dangers. We are no longer able to control the situation. The economic, political, and military system we have established have turned against us and imposed themselves on us, and we have become increasingly dehumanized. Future perspective. Let us consider, for example, the problem of food. The world population is presently almost 6 billion, and the majority of the members of the human family go to bed hungry every night. The Third World War will not be unleashed by the great power. It will break out first in the zone of famine and oppression. Famine and political oppression are the most profound causes of all war. Today, all wars, Vietnam, the Persian Gulf, have an international character. The great powers are engaged to them to a greater or lesser extent because their influence and their prestige are tied in large measure to this war. People on all sides trembled during the Cuban Missile Crisis. A world war can explode at any moment. A false alarm can create complete panic. We will possess the coolness necessary to control the situation. It could take only 250 atomic bombs to destroy the continent and people of North America. We still possess enough nuclear bomb to destroy everyone on Earth many times, and the button to trigger these weapons are in the reach of human beings. Pesticides and defoliants used in the war and also in agriculture have affected the ecological system of the entire Earth. According to UNESCO study, pelicans are becoming extinct along the California coast. The eggs of all but 5 of 1,200 pelican nests were infected by DDT and couldn't hatch. The conclusion of this report was, man will perhaps purge his own fault. Paul Ehrlich has stated, theoretically, the new techniques of agriculture should be able to increase the production of food to feed 7 billion or more people, but practically speaking, it is impossible. Stilling Bunner added, if we try to slow down famine by applying all the techniques that we know, such as the use of chemical fertilizer or insecticides, we could completely contaminate our biological environment. Nothing could survive in it, including man. The separation between the rich and the underdeveloped country continues to get greater and greater, and we cannot expect the separation to disappear in the near future. The debt that poor countries have to pay to the rich are greater each year than the sum they receive in aid to help them develop economically. The lack of capital, the lack of political stability, and the necessity to resist exploitation carried on by the great economic powers increase the difficulties and obstacles that the poorer countries meet on the way to liberation. At the same time, the affluent societies of the West consume the vast majority of the earth's resource and pollute the earth and its atmosphere by this consumption. The United States, for example, represents about 5% of the world's population, but it consumes nearly 40% of the world's resources. This disequilibrium makes the situation more and more dangerous. Professor C.P. Snow has predicted oceans of famine zoned within decades. War in such circumstances cannot be avoided. Scientists, historians, and sociologists have sounded the alarm, but our societies don't seem to change. We continue our daily lives contributing to the maintenance and consolidation of the machinery of production and consumption. We eat, drink, work, and distract ourselves as if nothing is going to happen. Is awakening possible? The problem that we face is the problem of awakening. What we lack is an ideology or a doctrine that will save the world. What we lack is mindfulness of what we are, of what our situation really is. We need to wake up in order to rediscover our human sovereignty. We are riding a horse that is running out of control. The way of salvation is a new culture in which human beings are encouraged to discover their deepest nature. Zen, as all other living spiritual traditions of the East or West, has contributed to the elevation of the spiritual life while clarifying the way of thought, art, and culture. But Zen in Asia is also degenerating under the force of technological civilization. The development of technology in the Western countries created the need to conquer African and Asian countries in order to ensure the possession of markets and industrial material. And the wars of liberation continue. War absorbs the energies of so many nations and aggravate the problem of hunger, already difficult to resolve, because of rapid population growth. All this turns society and the structure of its moral values upside down. The Zen tradition has also been shaken. In Vietnam, for example, the majority of Zen monasteries situated in distant regions in the mountains were destroyed during the war or afterward under the communist regime. The government formed its own Buddhist church to control the practice of Buddhism in the country and continues to arrest Buddhists and others who call for the free practice of religion. In China, socialism has mobilized the mass of people to realize national goals and in part to increase the army. The development of Japan's economy has made Japan into a Western-like nation in which many of its spiritual values have given way to rampant materialism. The temples and monasteries must also participate in the present economic way of life and be based upon the present social need of producing and consuming in order to exist. They can no longer play the role of spiritual leadership as in the past. Zen is threatened on the very ground on which it was born and developed. The West began to learn about Zen when it was already on its way to disintegration in Asia. Many of those in the West who appreciate Zen have had enough of the material civilization and the rationalist way. Technological civilization based on logic and science had reached its culmination and has begun to produce crisis and revolt. In this situation, then appear as something fresh and comforting. Paradoxically, at the same time, the citizens of the countries of the Zen tradition are turning toward a life of material comfort and subscribing to policies of intensive industrialization of their countries. Their time and energies are almost completely devoted to it, and this is the reason why things like Zen can no longer continue to be important. The East, like the West, is witnessing a spiritual bankruptcy. The destruction of the human race can only be avoided by finding a new cultural direction in which the spiritual dimension plays the role of guide. What we need isn't another doctrine, but an awakening that can restore our spiritual strength. What made Mahatma Gandhi struggle a great success wasn't a doctrine, not even the doctrine of nonviolence, but Gandhi himself, his way of being. A lot is written today about the doctrine of nonviolence, and people everywhere are trying to apply it, but they cannot rediscover the vitality of Gandhi had because the Gandhian don't possess Gandhi's spiritual strength. They have faith in his doctrine, but cannot set into motion a movement of great solidarity because none of them possess the spiritual force of a Gandhi, and therefore cannot produce sufficient compassion and sacrifice. If we continue to be dragged along by the machinery of producing and consuming, it will be difficult to build our spiritual strength. Gandhi dressed simply, walked on foot, and fed himself with frugality. The simplicity of his life is witnessed not only his emancipation with regard to conditioning by material things, but also a great spiritual strength. The point of departure for a new civilization must be our determination not to be colonized by material good or to contribute to the system of producing and consuming. Those determined to struggle against the treadmill of producing and consuming and for the recovery of human nature must be regarded as the avant-garde of our generation. Many people who live in abundance have revolted against materialism for the need to be a human being. This isn't a new view. It is one of the fundamental human needs, steeped by superficial accumulation. This need to be a human being is our greatest hope, the element that can give birth to a new civilization. The first phase of this civilization must be to establish social conditions in which life can be lived in a human way. Awakened people are certainly going to form small communities where their material life will be simple and healthy, and time and energy will be devoted to spiritual concerns. This community of mindful living will be like Zen monasteries with no dogma. In them, the sickness of the times will be cured, and spiritual health will be renewed. Great art and thought will be produced. In the East, Zen monasteries still exist, and the influence of Zen remains in literature, art, and manners. But in Westerns seem more interested in Zen than people in the East who are more preoccupied with material development and industrialization. They haven't tasted the bitterness of materialism and the inhuman nature of technological civilization. The rebirth of Buddhism in several Asian countries in the 20th century has been indirectly due to the work of Western scholars who, by their studies and research, have manifested their admiration for Buddhist art and thought. It is they who have helped the Asians regain confidence in their own cultural heritage. The same is happening with Zen Buddhism. Because Westerners are interested in Zen, many Asians have returned to their spiritual tradition. But even for enlightened person, however determined they may be, it is difficult to go against the system. What must we do to prevent ourselves from being overtaken by the system? Precipitating political or economic conflict doesn't seem to be the answer. Western men and women are turning toward the East to find new source of inspiration. In Eastern spirituality is found that tendency toward universal harmony that affects the heart. The East, although poor, has not suffered from the level of fanaticism and violence that the West has. But the East has been oppressed. The East has risen already to struggle against the West with arms, and the West has used against it. This is why the West has had difficulty in establishing a dialogue with the East. In its effort to learn from the West the technology that will enable it to defend itself, the East knows that it must be modest, ready to gather what it does know. But the majority of Westerners don't possess this feature of modesty in their approach to the East. They are satisfied with their methodology and their principles, and they remain attached to criteria and values of their own civilization while desiring to know the East. They are afraid of losing their identity, and this is the principal cause of their difficulties. Spirituality versus technology. Western civilization has brought us to the edge of the abyss. It has transformed us into machines. The awakening of a few Westerners, their awareness of our real situation, has freed them from their superiority complex. They are engaged in the search for new values. On the other side, some Asians have come to the West to introduce Eastern spiritual tradition. The intention is noble, but the task difficult. Unless they have deep understanding of Western culture and mentality, success will be difficult to obtain. There is the risk of simply imposing an Asian way of life on Westerners, who ultimately will find it difficult to sustain. Zen isn't a collection of ritual, it is life. Westerners who live in different social circumstances from those of the East cannot really imitate these Asian Buddhists. In the same way that Chinese Zen has Chinese characteristics, Western Zen must be Western in its form. An effort is therefore necessary. The West must be willing to set some of its ideas and preconceptions in order to be open to receiving a new experience. Easterners who attempt to help their Western friends must also make the effort to understand the Western mentality and the Western cultural social circumstance. It is only through such mutual effort and collaboration that Zen will become a living tradition in Western soil. Zen is the way of realizing the true person, as Lin Chi said, but the West has also spiritual traditions formed in the course of its history and aiming at realizing its own true person. We must honor the best aspect of all traditions. The problem is that many of these spiritual sources, Western and Eastern, have dried up. Religious institutions worldwide have become more political than spiritual. Motivated by material and political interests, they are engaged in worldly conflicts and neglect their spiritual tasks. Technological civilization continually creates new needs of consumption, most of which are not important. This civilization has also created suffering and tragedies. Religions must be conscious of our need to awaken to our true humanity. Churches must work to rebuild communities in which a sane and healthy life can be lived, realizing that true happiness doesn't rest on the consumption of good paid by suffering, famine, and death, but in a life of enlightened by the insight into interbeing and the recognition of our deep responsibility to be true to ourselves and to help our neighbors.